The little boy's tears fell as 38 officers walked away laughing. "The man in black is coming," he whispered through sobs. Only a homeless girl stopped to listen, unaware that both their lives would change forever in ways no one could imagine. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more shocking true stories that will leave you speechless. The screams of 3-year-old Ethan Pierce echoed through Central Park as tears streamed down his chubby cheeks. "The man in black is following me," he wailed, his tiny finger pointing toward the dense trees behind the playground. Officer James Donovan chuckled, nudging his partner. "Third kid this week with an invisible friend, huh?" A cluster of police officers had gathered for their morning briefing near the park when the hysterical toddler approached them. "Hey, buddy, there's nobody there," Officer Donovan said, ruffling Ethan's blonde hair. "Where's your mommy?" The child's sobs intensified. "I don't know. The man in black took her phone and pushed her. Please help." His pleading blue eyes darted frantically between the officers. "Look, another Park Avenue brat whose nanny stepped away for a cigarette," muttered Officer Reynolds, earning laughs from his colleagues. 38 officers, Ethan had counted them with his little finger, turned away one by one, returning to their coffee and pastries. None bothered to search the area or take the child's claims seriously. "We'll keep an eye out, kiddo," Officer Donovan called over his shoulder, already distracted by dispatch crackling through his radio. "I bet your mom is looking for you right now." As the police disbanded, a small shadow emerged from behind a nearby trash can. Lily, an 8-year-old with tangled brown hair and clothes that hadn't been washed in weeks, watched the scene unfold. Her sharp green eyes narrowed at the officer's dismissal. She knew better than most how it felt to be invisible to those who should protect you. "Hey," she whispered, approaching the boy cautiously, "I believe you." Ethan's sobs quieted as he stared at the dirty-faced girl. "You do?" "Yeah," Lily nodded, glancing toward the trees. "I've seen that man before. He's been watching the playground for 3 days." She extended her grimy hand. "I'm Lily. I can help you find your mom." "I'm Ethan," he sniffled, taking her hand without hesitation. "Mommy fell down after the man pushed her. She didn't get up." Lily's stomach tightened. Unlike those officers, she recognized the gravity in the little boy's words. "Show me where," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. What neither child knew was that Ethan Pierce was the grandson of billionaire developer Maxwell Pierce, who had died just yesterday, leaving his entire fortune to his estranged daughter and her son. Nor did they know that Officer Grant Reynolds, who had laughed the loudest at Ethan's pleas, had spent the last 8 years searching for his missing daughter after his ex-wife disappeared with her during a bitter custody battle. "And I guess some people don't need a badge to be heroes," remarked an elderly woman on a nearby bench, watching the children walk hand in hand toward the trees. 38 cops, and the only one who listened was a homeless child. The dense foliage swallowed the children as they ventured deeper into Central Park's wooded area. Ethan's tiny legs struggled to keep pace with Lily, but his grip on her hand remained fierce. "It was over there," he whispered, pointing to a secluded clearing ahead. "Stay behind me," Lily instructed, her street-hardened instincts kicking in. At 8, she'd learned to navigate dangers most adults never encountered. The clearing appeared empty at first glance, but Lily's trained eyes spotted the signs immediately: disturbed soil, broken twigs, and a woman's designer purse half hidden under fallen leaves. "That's Mommy's special bag!" Ethan broke free, rushing toward the expensive accessory. "Wait!" Lily called, but the boy had already retrieved the purse, clutching it like a lifeline. She approached cautiously, scanning the area for any movement. "Was this where you last saw your mom?" Ethan nodded frantically. "The man in black pushed her, and she fell down there." He pointed to an area where the ground looked recently disturbed. Then he took her phone and told her to be quiet forever. A chill ran down Lily's spine. With trembling fingers, she opened the purse, finding a wallet with ID cards, credit cards, and family photos. Catherine Pierce, she read aloud, studying the driver's license. The woman in the photo had Ethan's same blue eyes and blonde hair. Another photo showed Ethan sitting on the shoulders of an elderly man in front of a massive mansion. "That's Grandpa Max's house," Ethan said, pointing to the photo. "He has lots and lots of money and toys for me, but he went to heaven yesterday, and Mommy was crying." The pieces clicked together in Lily's mind: the timing, the expensive clothes Ethan wore, the premium leather purse. This wasn't a random incident. "We need to get help, real help," Lily decided, pocketing the driver's license. "Not those stupid cops who laughed at you." A twig snapped nearby and both children froze. "He's coming back," Ethan whimpered, burying his face in Lily's ragged jacket. Thinking quickly, Lily pulled Ethan behind a large oak tree, covering his mouth gently. "Don't make a sound," she whispered as heavy footsteps approached. Through a gap in the bushes, she glimpsed a tall figure dressed entirely in black, scanning the clearing with methodical precision. The man cursed under his breath when he noticed the missing purse. "The kid must have come back," he muttered into a phone. "Find him. The will gets read at noon, and that brat needs to be missing when they do." As the man stalked away, Lily's mind raced. Noon. They had less than 3 hours to find real help, someone who would believe them over the 38 officers who'd already failed this little boy. "My mommy," Ethan whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "Is she—" Lily squeezed his hand. "We're going to find her, Ethan, I promise." She didn't know if she could keep that promise, but she knew one thing for certain: this little boy was in danger, and for the first time in her life, someone needed her. The early morning sun cast long shadows as Lily led Ethan through back alleys and narrow passages, routes invisible to most but familiar to those who lived on society's margins. Her mind worked furiously, processing what she'd overheard. Will reading at noon, missing heir, billion-dollar stakes. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked, struggling to keep up despite Lily's efforts to moderate her pace. "To see someone smarter than those cops," she replied, guiding him toward a converted warehouse in a neglected corner of the city. "Mr. Winters knows everything that happens around here." The old newspaper vendor had been Lily's unofficial guardian since she'd escaped the foster care system 6 months ago. A Vietnam veteran with a sharp mind and sharper instincts, Harold Winters had created a network of homeless informants who kept tabs on the city's underground activities. "Well, if it isn't my favorite news girl," Harold called out when they entered his cluttered space. His smile faded when he saw Ethan. "Lily, tell me you didn't—" "I didn't kidnap him, if that's what you're thinking," Lily cut in. "This is Ethan Pierce. His mom's in trouble and the police wouldn't listen." Harold's weathered face paled. "Pierce? As in Maxwell Pierce's grandson?" He quickly ushered them inside, bolting the door behind them. "The whole city's looking for this kid." He switched on a small television where a breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Amber alert! 3-year-old Ethan Pierce missing. Mother Catherine Pierce found unconscious in Central Park." "Mommy's alive." Ethan's voice cracked with hope. "She's in critical condition at Presbyterian," Harold said, studying the news report. "And they're saying a homeless child was seen luring you away from police officers who were trying to help." "That's a lie!" Lily exploded. "Those cops laughed at him, 38 of them. I counted while they walked away." Harold raised a calming hand. "I believe you, kiddo, but it's your word against theirs, and right now you're being painted as a kidnapper." "The man in black," Ethan insisted, his small face scrunched with determination. "He hurt Mommy and said I need to be missing when they read Grandpa's will." Harold's expression darkened. "Maxwell Pierce died yesterday, heart attack. His fortune's estimated at $11 billion. He turned to Lily. "This ain't some random crime kid. This is big league stuff." "We need to get to the hospital," Lily decided. "If his mom wakes up, she can tell everyone what really happened." "And walk right into a trap?" Harold shook his head. "Whoever's behind this has already framed you and has people at that hospital, guaranteed." Lily felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her young shoulders. Every minute that passed put Ethan in greater danger. The will reading was approaching, and powerful forces wanted this little boy eliminated from the equation. "There's something else," she said quietly, pulling out Catherine's driver's license. "I need you to run a background check on Officer Grant Reynolds. He was there this morning," laughed the loudest at Ethan. Harold raised an eyebrow but didn't question her. Within minutes, his ancient computer had pulled up Reynolds' personnel file. Divorced 8 years ago. Ex-wife disappeared with their daughter during a custody battle. Been looking for them ever since. Lily stared at the screen, at the photo of a young girl with familiar green eyes. What was the daughter's name? Harold scrolled down, then froze. Lily Reynolds. The warehouse fell silent as Ethan looked between them, confused. "Is that your daddy?" he asked innocently. Lily's world tilted on its axis. "He's not my father," she whispered. "A father wouldn't leave his daughter homeless." Officer Grant Reynolds slumped at his desk, scrolling through the Amber Alert details for the Pierce boy. Something about the case nagged at him, the child's insistence about a man in black, the convenient timing after the billionaire's death, and especially that homeless girl. Those eyes had struck a chord so deep he'd spent the morning in a fog of déjà vu. "Reynolds!" Captain Harris barked from his office doorway. "Why aren't you out searching for the Pierce kid like everyone else?" "Something doesn't add up, sir," Reynolds replied, pulling up security footage from Central Park. "The boy approached us claiming someone attacked his mother. 3 hours later, Catherine Pierce is found unconscious with signs of assault, exactly where he said she'd be." "So the kid was telling the truth. What's your point?" "My point is, we ignored him, all of us, and the only person who listened was that homeless girl. What if she wasn't abducting him? What if she was trying to help?" Captain Harris scoffed. "A convenient theory to absolve yourself of screwing up. The commissioner's breathing down my neck on this one. The Pierce family has connections all the way to the governor's office." Reynolds leaned forward. "Give me 2 hours to review the park's security footage before I join the search." 1 hour, Harris conceded reluctantly. "Then I want your ass on the streets finding that boy." Alone again, Reynolds isolated footage from cameras surrounding the park entrance. There, a grainy image captured Catherine Pierce entering the park with Ethan at 7:15 a.m. At 7:22 a.m., a figure in dark clothing followed them in. The attack itself happened in a camera blind spot, but at 7:43 a.m., the same figure emerged alone, something clutched in his hand. Reynolds enhanced the image, focusing on the object, a cell phone. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, pulling up the footage from their morning briefing. There was Ethan, desperately trying to tell them about the attack. And there was the homeless girl, watching from the shadows before approaching the boy after they'd all walked away. The final footage showed the children heading not toward the park exit, but deeper into the wooded area, toward where Catherine Pierce was later found. Reynolds' phone rang, displaying the hospital's number. "Officer Reynolds. This is Dr. Patel at Presbyterian. You asked to be notified if Catherine Pierce regained consciousness. She's awake and asking for her son." "I'll be right there." Reynolds grabbed his jacket, then hesitated, making a quick detection to the evidence locker. If his suspicions were correct, he'd need protection from his own colleagues. 20 minutes later, he stood beside Catherine Pierce's hospital bed. Her face was bruised, a ventilator helping her breathe, but her eyes were alert and terrified. "Mrs. Pierce, I'm Officer Reynolds. Can you tell me what happened this morning?" She struggled to speak around the tube in her throat. A nurse handed her a notepad. With trembling fingers, she wrote, "Brother-in-law, James Pierce, trying to kill Ethan before Will Reading." "Your brother-in-law was the man in black?" She nodded weakly, writing again, "Where is my son?" Reynolds swallowed hard. "We believe he's with a young homeless girl. Security footage suggests she was trying to help him, not abduct him." Catherine's eyes widened as she scribbled frantically, "Find him! James has police on payroll." "Do you know which officers?" Her hand froze mid-sentence as her gaze shifted to the doorway behind Reynolds. Her heart monitor began beeping rapidly. Reynolds turned to find Officer Donovan standing there, hand resting casually on his service weapon. "Taking witness statements without your partner, Reynolds?" Donovan asked, his smile not reaching his eyes. "That's against protocol." Reynolds positioned himself between Donovan and the hospital bed. "Just following a hunch." "Well, follow this hunch instead," Donovan replied, drawing his weapon. "Walk out with me now, or things get messy for everyone in this room." Lily stared at Harold's computer screen, the name Lily Reynolds burning into her retinas. Memories she'd suppressed for years bubbled to the surface. Her mother rushing her into a car late at night, changing their names, moving from city to city, always looking over their shoulders. "Your mom took you for a reason, kid," Harold said gently, recognizing the storm behind her eyes. "And from what I've heard about Reynolds, it wasn't just because she lost a custody battle." "He used to hurt her," Lily whispered, the admission painful even after all these years. "She said he'd hurt me too, eventually." Harold nodded grimly. "Your mother did what she had to. Question is, what are you going to do now?" Ethan tugged at Lily's sleeve, his small face pinched with worry. "Are the bad policemen going to find us?" The question snapped Lily back to their immediate crisis. Her problems with Officer Reynolds would have to wait. Right now, a 3-year-old's life was at stake. "We need to get to that will reading," she decided. "If Ethan shows up there, he ruins their plans." "Pierce Tower, noon," Harold confirmed, checking his watch. "That's less than an hour from now, and it's crawling with security." "Then we need a distraction." Lily's mind raced. "And someone they won't suspect." Harold's eyes lit up. "I might know just the person." He grabbed his ancient flip phone, punching in a number. "Madame Justice, it's Harold. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm cashing in." 10 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside the warehouse. The driver, an elegant woman in her 60s with silver hair, twisted into a severe bun, surveyed Lily and Ethan with piercing eyes. "Supreme Court Justice Eleanor Hammond," she introduced herself, extending a manicured hand to Lily. "Harold once saved my nephew from a very bad situation. I don't ask questions about his methods. We need to get this boy to Pierce Tower for his grandfather's will reading," Lily explained. "Someone's trying to make sure he doesn't show up." Justice Hammond's expression hardened. "The Pierce estate. I've heard rumors about James Pierce's financial troubles. Taking control of his nephew's inheritance would solve those quite neatly." "Can you get us in?" Harold pressed. "Better." She smiled thinly. "I'm the executor of Maxwell Pierce's will. I'm already expected there." Lily hesitated. "They're looking for me. They're saying I kidnapped Ethan." "Then perhaps a change of appearance is in order." Justice Hammond opened her purse, extracting a small case. "My granddaughter left these in my car last weekend." Inside were a child-sized dress, tights, and a blonde wig, remnants of a dance recital costume. Within minutes, Lily was transformed from a street urchin into what appeared to be a well-dressed little girl from an affluent family. "What about Harold?" Lily asked, unfamiliar with the feeling of clean clothes against her skin. "I've got my own route," Harold winked. "The service entrance has known me as the maintenance guy for years." And as they prepared to leave, Ethan suddenly froze. "The man in black, he's outside." They peered through the grimy window to see a tall figure in a dark suit scanning the street, accompanied by 2 uniformed police officers. "James Pierce, Justice Hammond confirmed grimly. "And it appears he has the police in his pocket." "Ah, and the back exit," Harold whispered, leading them toward a concealed door. "We have to split up. They're expecting a homeless girl and a little boy, not a distinguished judge with two well-dressed children." "And if they catch you?" Lily asked, suddenly afraid for the old man who'd been her only protector. Harold's weathered face creased into a smile. "Then I'll finally get to use all those lawyer jokes I've been saving up." He pressed a small object into Lily's hand. A voice recorder. "Insurance policy. I've been recording everything since you arrived." As they slipped out the back door, Justice Hammond's car waiting in the adjacent alley, Lily realized the magnitude of what they were attempting. They were about to crash a billion-dollar will reading, accuse a powerful man of attempted murder, and somehow convince everyone that a homeless 8-year-old girl was telling the truth while 38 police officers were lying. "You know," Justice Hammond remarked as they pulled away, "in my 30 years on the bench, I've never been the getaway driver for a jailbreak before. There's a first time for everything, I suppose." The standoff in Catherine Pierce's hospital room crackled with tension. Officer Reynolds maintained his position between the bed and Donovan's drawn weapon, painfully aware that his service pistol remained holstered. "Think carefully about your next move, Donovan," Reynolds warned. "Security cameras are recording everything." Donovan's smile widened. "Already taken care of. Maintenance issues with the third-floor surveillance system won't be fixed until tomorrow. Convenient, isn't it?" Catherine's heart monitor beeped faster as she frantically scribbled on her notepad, holding it up for Reynolds to see. "James paying them $500K each. $500,000 to eliminate a 3-year-old? Reynolds said, disgust evident in his voice. "That's what your badge is worth." "It's not personal," Donovan shrugged. "The kid won't even suffer. Quick and clean, unlike what'll happen to you if you don't step aside." Reynolds' mind raced, cataloguing his options. The nurse had fled when Donovan drew his weapon. Hospital security was at least 2 minutes away. Catherine Pierce couldn't move from her bed. "You know," Reynolds said conversationally, "my daughter would be about 8 now. Haven't seen her since my ex disappeared with her. Spent 8 years looking." "Touching story," Donovan replied, clearly impatient. "What's your point?" "My point is, I've spent nearly a decade searching for one child. I'm not about to let another one die on my watch." In one fluid motion, Reynolds grabbed the metal food tray from Catherine's bedside table and flung it at Donovan. The distraction worked. Donovan instinctively fired at the flying object, the bullet embedding itself in the wall. Before he could recover, Reynolds tackled him, sending both men crashing into the hallway. They struggled for control of Donovan's weapon, rolling across the polished floor as startled medical staff scattered. Reynolds managed to pin Donovan's gun hand, slamming it repeatedly against the hard floor until the weapon clattered free. "Security!" Reynolds shouted. "Officer needs assistance!" Donovan's fist connected with Reynolds's jaw, momentarily stunning him. "You have no idea what you're messing with," Donovan snarled, reaching for his backup weapon. A deafening crash interrupted them as a hospital security cart smashed into Donovan, pinning him against the wall. Behind the cart stood an elderly janitor, his weathered face grim with determination. "Thought you could use a hand," Harold Winters said, extending a help to Reynolds. "Seems we're both working for the same team today." Reynolds accepted the assistance, staring in confusion. "Who the hell are you?" "You're just a concerned citizen," Harold replied cryptically. "One who knows where Ethan Pierce is, and where your daughter is too." Reynolds froze. "My daughter? You know where Lily is?" "Let's just say I've been keeping an eye on her." Harold nodded toward Catherine's room. "But first we need to get Mrs. Pierce somewhere safe. James Pierce won't stop with just one dirty cop." As if summoned by his words, the elevator at the end of the hall dinged, revealing 3 more uniformed officers with hands suspiciously close to their weapons. "Friends of yours?" Harold asked. Reynolds' expression darkened. Not anymore. Well, this day just keeps getting more interesting, Harold muttered, glancing at his watch. 30 minutes until the will reading. Hope the judge knows what she's doing. Judge? What judge? Reynolds demanded. But Harold was already moving, pushing Catherine's bed toward the service elevator. Less talking, more running, the old man advised, unless you want to explain to your daughter why you let a billionaire's hitmen kill her first real friend. Reynolds hesitated only a second before following, drawing his weapon as the corrupt officers broke into a run. This is going to end my career, you know that. Harold chuckled despite their dire situation. Officer, from what I hear, finding your daughter should be worth a career or two. As they crashed through the service doors, Reynolds couldn't help but wonder what kind of homeless child had inspired such loyalty, and if he dared hope it might be the daughter he'd spent 8 years searching for. Pierce Tower dominated the Manhattan skyline, its gleaming facade a testament to Maxwell Pierce's architectural vision. In the penthouse boardroom, 16 stories above the bustling streets, the city's most powerful attorneys had assembled for the reading of his will. Justice Eleanor Hammond swept into the room like royalty, her silver hair catching the light, her black robes adding gravitas to her already commanding presence. Behind her walked 2 children, a small blonde boy in an expensive suit, and a girl in a frilly dress with golden curls peeking from beneath a headband. Justice Hammond! James Pierce rose from his seat at the head of the table, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. We weren't expecting children at this reading. These are my grandchildren, she replied smoothly. Their mother is unwell, and I couldn't find a sitter on such short notice. I'm sure Maxwell wouldn't have minded young ones at his farewell. He always did adore children. James's gaze lingered suspiciously on the disguised Lily before he nodded stiffly. Of course, we're just waiting for confirmation about my nephew's situation before we begin. Situation? Justice Hammond raised an eyebrow, guiding the children to seats near the back of the room. A terrible tragedy, James sighed, feigning concern. My nephew Ethan was apparently abducted from Central Park this morning by a homeless girl. His mother was attacked and is currently hospitalized. How dreadful, the judge replied, her expression betraying nothing. And have the police made any progress? As if on cue, James's phone buzzed. He checked the message, his face momentarily darkening before he composed himself. It seems there have been complications, but we shouldn't delay the proceedings any longer. Justice Hammond took her place at the center of the conference table, opening a leather portfolio. Very well, we are gathered here today for the reading of Maxwell Pierce's last will and testament, dated September 15th of this year. Lily watched from her chair as the judge began reciting legal formalities. Her gaze swept the room, cataloguing potential threats and exits. James Pierce stood too stiffly, his hand repeatedly checking his phone. 2 security guards positioned by the main doors seemed overly attentive to the children. The bulk of my estate, including controlling interest in Pierce Developments and all associated holdings, valued at approximately $11 billion, I leave to my daughter Catherine and her son Ethan. Justice Hammond read clearly. In the event of Catherine's death, everything passes to Ethan to be managed in trust until his 25th birthday. James's knuckles whitened around his water glass. And if both are unavailable? He asked, struggling to maintain his composure. Justice Hammond peered at him over her reading glasses. The will stipulates that in the unlikely event of both Catherine and Ethan's deaths, the estate would pass to you, James, as Maxwell's only other living relative. I see. James nodded, checking his watch. And given the current circumstances, with Catherine incapacitated and Ethan missing, presumed present, Ethan suddenly shouted, standing on his chair. I'm right here, Uncle James. The room froze, as all eyes turned to the small boy, now pointing accusingly at his uncle. He's the man in black who hurt my mommy. James recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. My poor confused nephew, traumatized by today's events. Obviously, I've been here all morning preparing for this meeting. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway, that's not true. Officer Reynolds entered, supporting a pale but determined Catherine Pierce in a wheelchair. Behind them stood Harold, arms crossed defiantly. "Mom!" Ethan cried, jumping down and running to Catherine, who embraced him with her good arm, tears streaming down her face. "This is absurd," James sputtered, signaling to his security guards. "These people are trespassing. Remove them immediately." "I wouldn't," Justice Hammond cautioned as the guards stepped forward. "Not unless you want federal charges added to the attempted murder and conspiracy counts you're already facing." She nodded to Lily, who pulled Harold's voice recorder from her pocket and pressed play. James Pierce's voice filled the room. "Find him. The will gets read at noon, and that brat needs to be missing when they do. Surveillance footage from Central Park confirms you followed Catherine and Ethan this morning," Reynolds added, "and Officer Donovan has already started talking, hoping for a deal." James lunged suddenly, grabbing Lily and pressing a concealed handgun to her temple. "Nobody moves. This little street rat ruined everything." But the disguise had come loose in his grip, revealing Lily's true appearance. Reynolds stared in shock at the girl's face, at the green eyes he'd recognize anywhere. "Lily," he whispered, his voice breaking, "after 8 years." "Stay back!" James shouted, backing toward the exit with Lily as his shield. "Anyone follows, she dies." "You know," Lily said calmly, meeting Reynolds' gaze, "living on the streets teaches you a few things." Without warning, she stomped hard on James's instep while simultaneously driving her elbow into his solar plexus. The billionaire's brother-in-law doubled over in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Lily to twist free. Reynolds didn't hesitate, tackling James to the ground and securing his weapon. "You've just assaulted a federal judge's official ward," Justice Hammond informed James as Reynolds handcuffed him. "I believe that elevates this to a federal offense." As James was led away, Reynolds approached Lily cautiously, dropping to one knee to meet her at eye level. "I never stopped looking for you," he said, voice thick with emotion. Lily regarded him warily. "Mum said you'd hurt us." Reynolds winced. "Your mother had problems. She convinced herself I was a danger after I arrested her for drug possession. The courts gave me full custody, but she took you and ran." "If that's true," Lily challenged, "why did you become a dirty cop who ignores kids asking for help?" The accusation struck Reynolds like a physical blow. "I'm not corrupt, Lily. I made a terrible mistake this morning, but I've been trying to make it right." Harold cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, kid, I checked him out thoroughly. Your dad's been looking for you non-stop for 8 years. Has one of the best records on the force." Ethan wiggled free from his mother's embrace and approached Lily. "Is he really your daddy? The one you said wasn't your daddy before?" Reynolds looked between the children, confusion evident. "You two know each other." "She saved me," Ethan stated matter-of-factly. "When 38 policemen wouldn't listen about the man in black, Lily did. She's my best friend now." Catherine Pierce wheeled herself forward. "Your daughter is a hero, Officer Reynolds. Without her, my son would be dead and his uncle would have stolen billions." "I don't care about being a hero," Lily said quietly. "I just want." She trailed off, unsure how to articulate 8 years of longing. "A home?" Reynolds suggested gently, not reaching for her, respecting her space. For the first time that day, Lily allowed herself to look truly vulnerable. Is that still an option? 3 weeks later, Lily sat on a park bench beside her father, watching Ethan chase butterflies across the manicured lawn of the Pierce estate. The late autumn sun cast long shadows across the grounds, and a comfortable silence had settled between them, the kind that comes after many difficult conversations. "Still feels weird," she admitted, swinging her legs that didn't quite reach the ground. Having a real bed, regular meals, not having to watch my back all the time. Reynolds nodded, understanding in his eyes. Trauma doesn't disappear overnight, even when the danger's gone. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of changes. James Pierce and his police accomplices were facing multiple felony charges. Catherine Pierce had appointed Reynolds as her new head of security, partly in gratitude and partly to give him flexible hours as he reconnected with his daughter. "Mrs. Pierce said they're finding more evidence every day," Lily remarked. "Apparently, Uncle James has been embezzling from the company for years." The DA thinks that's why he was so desperate," Reynolds confirmed. "He needed Ethan gone before forensic accountants went through the books after Maxwell died." Lily watched Ethan playing carefree, a stark contrast to the terrified toddler from 3 weeks ago. "He doesn't remember much, you know. Says it feels like a bad dream now." Kids are resilient," Reynolds said. "Adults too, sometimes," he added, glancing meaningfully at his daughter. The sound of wheels on gravel announced Catherine's approach. Though still recovering from her injuries, she insisted on daily outdoor time for Ethan, and by extension, for Lily, who had become the boy's inseparable companion. "Officer Reynolds, Lily," she greeted them warmly. "I've just had a very interesting call from Justice Hammond." Reynolds straightened. "Good news about the case?" "Better," Catherine smiled. "She's found a legal precedent that might help Harold with his housing situation." Harold Winters had become a frequent visitor to the Pierce estate, his decades of street wisdom proving invaluable to the new security protocols Reynolds was implementing. The old newspaper vendor had refused Catherine's offers of an apartment, claiming he was too set in his ways for conventional living. "What kind of precedent?" Lily asked suspiciously. "Apparently, there's a provision for estate guardians, individuals granted residence on the property in exchange for advisory services." Catherine's eyes twinkled. "The judge thinks we can classify Harold's institutional knowledge as essential to estate security." Reynolds chuckled. "You're building him a house on the grounds, aren't you?" "A small cottage by the eastern wall," Catherine confirmed. "Close enough for regular visits, but independent enough to maintain his dignity." Lily beamed, genuinely happy for the first time in recent memory. Harold had been her only family for months. Knowing he would be nearby eased one of her lingering anxieties. "There's one more thing," Catherine continued, her expression growing serious. "The board has been reviewing Maxwell's final projects, and we've discovered something concerning." She handed Reynolds a file folder. Inside were architectural plans for a massive development in a familiar neighborhood, the same area where Lily had been living on the streets. "My father-in-law planned to demolish 14 city blocks for this luxury complex," Catherine explained, "including all the places where homeless children tend to gather." Lily's stomach dropped. "But that's where my friends are. Tommy, Sarah, Marcus, they all hide in those abandoned buildings." "Exactly," Catherine nodded grimly, "which is why I'm halting the project immediately. But that still leaves dozens of homeless children with nowhere safe to go." Reynolds studied the documents. "You're thinking of repurposing the investment." "A residential facility for homeless youth," Catherine confirmed, "with educational resources, medical care, and legal assistance for family reunification when appropriate." "Like what happened with me and Dad," Lily realized. "Yes, though your situation was unique." Catherine smiled wryly. "Not many runaways have billionaire benefactors and Supreme Court justices in their corner." Ethan had wandered back during their conversation. "Is Lily going to help the other kids like she helped me?" he asked, climbing onto his mother's lap. Catherine brushed his hair from his eyes. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss. Lily has first-hand knowledge no adult social worker could possibly have. We'd like her input on designing the facility." "Me?" Lily looked startled. "But I'm just a kid." A kid who survived 8 months on the streets, evaded city services, found safe sleeping locations, and knew which adults could be trusted, Reynolds pointed out proudly. That's expertise, Lily. For the first time in years, Lily felt truly seen, not as a problem to be solved or a victim to be pitied, but as a person with valuable knowledge and experience. "There's just one small problem with your plan," she said, a hint of her street-smart skepticism returning. Catherine raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Lily gestured toward the sprawling mansion. "Rich people always think they know what poor people need without actually asking them. If you want this to work, you need to talk to the kids themselves." Catherine and Reynolds exchanged surprised glances, then began to laugh. "What's so funny?" Lily demanded. "You sound exactly like your father in a board meeting last week," Catherine explained. "He said, and I quote, 'Wealthy security clients always think they know what threats they face without consulting experts.'" Reynolds shrugged, still chuckling. The attitude apparently runs in the family. As Ethan tugged Lily away to continue their butterfly chase, Catherine watched them thoughtfully. "You know, most children who've experienced what she has would be broken by it. Instead, she's one of the strongest people I've ever met." "She gets that from her mother, actually," Reynolds admitted quietly. For all her faults, Claire was a fighter. "Have you told Lily yet about her mother's fate?" Reynolds shook his head. "Not yet. How do you tell a child that her mother died of an overdose 3 years ago in a motel room with no identification? That she was alone on the streets all this time because there was no one left to take care of her?" "When the time is right, you'll find the words," Catherine assured him. "Until then, let her enjoy being a child again." They watched as Lily helped Ethan climb a low tree branch, her protective instincts obvious in the way she spotted him from below, arms outstretched to catch him if he fell. "She may be 8 years old," Catherine observed, "but that girl has the soul of a guardian angel." Reynolds nodded, pride and sadness mingling in his expression. 38 trained officers walked away from a child in danger. She was the only one who stopped to listen. "Well," Catherine said, rising from her wheelchair for a few experimental steps, "perhaps that's exactly the perspective we need to rebuild a security system and a family from the ground up." The first snowfall of winter transformed the Pierce estate into a wonderland of white. From her bedroom window, Lily watched the flakes drift lazily past, forming pristine drifts against the stone walls. After nearly 2 months in her father's home, she still found herself checking escape routes and hiding places, old habits dying hard. "Knock, knock," Reynolds called softly from the doorway. "Got a minute?" Lily nodded, still gazing out at the snow. "Is it time for school already?" The transition to formal education had been challenging. Despite her street smarts, Lily's academic knowledge had significant gaps. Catherine had arranged for private tutoring at the estate until Lily felt ready for regular classes. "No school today. It's Saturday." Reynolds sat on the window seat beside her. "I actually wanted to talk to you about something important." Lily tensed instinctively. In her experience, important talks rarely brought good news. Noticing her reaction, Reynolds continued gently, "It's about your mother. You found her?" Lily's voice held a complex mix of hope and fear. Reynolds took a deep breath. "Lily, I've been searching for your mother since the day you disappeared. 3 years ago, I got a call from a detective in Philadelphia about a Jane Doe who matched her description." Understanding dawned in Lily's eyes. "She's dead, isn't she?" "Yes, sweetheart, I'm so sorry." Reynolds fought to keep his voice steady. She had no identification, but DNA confirmed it was Claire. Lily turned back to the window, her reflection showing no tears, just a hollow acceptance that no child should possess. "How?" "An overdose. She'd been struggling with addiction for years, even before she took you." "I know," Lily said quietly. "She started getting sick a lot when I was 5. That's when we moved to the shelter in Queens. Then one day, she didn't come back. Reynolds felt his heart breaking. You've been on your own since you were 5. Not right away. A lady at the shelter took care of me for a while. Then social services came, and I ran away. I was afraid they'd send me back to you, and Mom always said. She trailed off. That I would hurt you, Reynolds finished for her. Lily, your mother was very sick. Not just with addiction, but with paranoia. She believed things that weren't true. So you never hit her, never threatened us? Never, Reynolds affirmed. I loved you both. I was trying to get her into treatment when she ran with you. Lily absorbed this in silence, watching snowflakes accumulate on the windowsill. I think part of me knew she was lying. But when you're little, you believe your parents. I understand, Reynolds assured her, and I don't blame her. Addiction changes the brain, makes people do and say things they wouldn't otherwise. Is that why you became a police officer, to help people like Mom? Reynolds smiled sadly. I was already an officer when I met your mother, but losing you both certainly shaped the kind of cop I became. A knock at the door interrupted them. Ethan stood there in pajamas printed with cartoon dinosaurs, his expression hopeful. Lily, Mum says we can build a snowman if you want to, a really, really big one. Reynolds glanced at his daughter, ready to defer their conversation, but Lily surprised him. Can we finish talking about Mom first? She asked, a new maturity in her voice. I want to know everything. Ethan's face fell. Oh, I'll tell Mom you're busy. Wait, Lily called before he could leave. Give me 20 minutes, then we'll build the biggest snowman this place has ever seen. Once Ethan had scampered off, Lily turned back to her father. I want to see where she's buried. Reynolds nodded. We can visit whenever you're ready. I made sure she had a proper burial, even before we knew for certain what happened to you. Thank you, Lily whispered, the simple acknowledgement laden with meaning. There's something else you should know, Reynolds continued. After the DNA confirmation, I was able to access her personal effects. He reached into his pocket, extracting a small, worn envelope. She was carrying this when she died. Lily accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph, creased and faded, but unmistakably showing a younger Reynolds holding a toddler Lily on his shoulders, both laughing at the camera. She kept it all those years, Reynolds explained. The detective said it was the only personal item she had. For the first time since their reunion, Lily allowed tears to fall freely. She must have loved you once. She did, Reynolds confirmed. And she never stopped loving you, Lily. Whatever her faults, whatever her illness made her do, she was trying to protect you in the only way her broken mind could understand. They sat together in silence as the snow continued to fall, creating a clean white blanket over the world outside. After several minutes, Lily spoke again, her voice stronger. You know what this means, right? Reynolds raised an eyebrow. What's that? It means I'm officially stuck with you, Lily declared, attempting a wobbly smile. No more wondering if Mum's coming back, no more looking over my shoulder. Is that okay with you? Reynolds asked carefully. Lily considered this, then nodded slowly. I think so, but I have conditions. Of course you do, Reynolds chuckled. Let's hear them. 1, we still build the youth center and you let me help design it. 2, we find all my friends from the streets and make sure they're safe. 3, you teach me everything about being a detective because I'm obviously better at it than you are. I found evidence in the park that 38 cops missed. Those sound like reasonable terms, Reynolds agreed, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Anything else? Lily's gaze returned to the photograph. Just one more thing. I want to know everything about her, the good parts before she got sick. I want to remember my mom the right way. Outside, Catherine's voice called up to them. The snow's perfect for building. Are you coming down? Lily tucked the photograph carefully into her pocket and stood, extending her hand to Reynolds. "Come on, Dad. We've got a snowman to build, and I think we're already behind schedule." As they descended the stairs together, Reynolds marveled at his daughter's resilience. In the face of loss and hard truths, she chose to move forward rather than retreat. In that moment, he understood that his role was not to protect her from pain, but to walk beside her through it, and to catch her only if she asked. Spring arrived at the Pierce estate with an explosion of color and activity. Construction crews swarmed over the former demolition site in the city, transforming abandoned buildings into the Catherine Pierce Youth Center. Lily had thrown herself into the project with characteristic determination, insisting on weekly site visits and regular meetings with the architects. "The bathrooms need more privacy," she informed Catherine during one such meeting, pointing to the blueprints spread across the dining table. "And the sleeping areas should have storage lockers with real locks, not those flimsy school ones." Catherine nodded, making notes. "Security versus dignity. It's a balance we're still working on." "Kids who feel respected are less likely to run away," Lily explained with the wisdom of experience. "Trust me, I tested every system in the city." From his position at the head of security team, Reynolds watched the interaction with pride. His daughter's journey from street-hardened survivor to passionate advocate had been remarkable to witness. The nightmares still came occasionally, and she remained wary of certain adults, but her healing progressed steadily. Ethan burst into the room, waving a tablet excitedly. "Lily, Mr. Harold's cottage is finished. Want to see?" Harold Winters had finally accepted Catherine's offer of permanent residence on the estate. His cottage strategically positioned to maintain his independence while keeping him close to his young friends. The elder man had become an unexpected bridge between Lily's past and present, helping her reconcile the different parts of her life. "Is he moving in today?" Lily asked, abandoning the blueprints to follow Ethan. "This afternoon," Catherine confirmed. "Perhaps you could help him settle in." The children raced off, leaving Catherine and Reynolds to review the center's security protocols, a task that had taken on heightened importance since James Pierce's recent bail hearing. "How's Lily handling the news about her uncle's release?" Catherine asked once the children were out of earshot. Reynolds frowned. "Better than expected, though she's asking more questions about the trial. She wants to testify." "Is that wise? She's only 8, and the media attention would be intense." "No, 9 next week," Reynolds corrected automatically. "And I'm not sure wisdom enters into it. She feels responsible for seeing this through, for all the children who might be endangered if James walks free." Catherine leaned back in her wheelchair, which she still used on days when her injuries flared up. "Your daughter has more courage than most adults I know." "Too much, sometimes," Reynolds admitted. "She still thinks she needs to carry the world on her shoulders." Their conversation was interrupted by the estate's security system. A car had entered the main gate, unexpected as no visitors were scheduled. Reynolds checked the security feed on his tablet. "It's Judge Hammond. She never comes without calling first." They met the judge in the foyer, her typically composed expression replaced by one of urgent concern. "James Pierce made bail an hour ago," she announced without preamble. "His electronic monitoring device has already been tampered with, and he's in the wind." Reynolds immediately activated the estate's lockdown protocol from his phone. "How?" "His bail was set at 20 million. "Anonymous donor," the judge replied grimly. "And I suspect I know exactly who. Pierce Development's CFO, Martin Delgado. He's been missing since this morning, along with nearly 200 million in company funds." Catherine paled. "They're running." "Yes, but not before James ties up loose ends." Hammond handed Reynolds a file. "This was delivered to my chambers an hour ago. transfer paperwork for an offshore account in Ethan's name, backdated to before Maxwell's death, making it appear that James was merely managing his nephew's funds, not stealing them. Falsified documents, Reynolds noted, scanning the papers. But high-quality forgeries that could create reasonable doubt in his trial. "There's more," Hammond continued. "Sources at the courthouse report James was overheard making threats against, and I quote, 'the little street rat who ruined everything.'" Reynolds' blood ran cold. Lily. As if summoned by her name, Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, Ethan at her side. "Dad? Why's the security alarm on?" Before Reynolds could answer, the sound of breaking glass shattered the tense atmosphere. Smoke began pouring from the eastern wing of the mansion, where Harold's newly completed cottage stood. "Harold!" Lily screamed, turning to race toward the source of the smoke. "Lily, wait!" Reynolds called, but she had already disappeared down the hallway. With a frustrated curse, he turned to Catherine. "Get Ethan to the panic room, now!" The security system blared as Reynolds sprinted after his daughter, drawing his service weapon. 3 years of searching, 2 months of rebuilding trust. He would not lose Lily again, especially not to James Pierce's vendetta. He caught up to her at the French doors, leading to the East Gardens, restraining her as she fought to reach the smoke-engulfed cottage. "Lily, stop, it could be a trap. Harold might be in there," she cried, struggling against his grip. "Security Team Alpha is already checking," he assured her. "Our job is to get you somewhere safe." "No!" Lily broke free, her street-honed instincts still razor-sharp. "Don't you see? This is a diversion. If James wanted Harold, he would have waited until he moved in this afternoon." Reynolds' radio crackled. "East perimeter breach. Armed intruder heading for the main house." Realization dawned in Lily's eyes. "He's after Ethan!" Before Reynolds could respond, gunshots erupted from the direction of the main house. Without hesitation, father and daughter raced back, communication unnecessary between them. When they reached the foyer, they found Justice Hammond taking cover behind an overturned table, a small revolver clutched in her hand. "Catherine took Ethan to the panic room," she informed them, her judicial composure remarkably intact despite the chaos. "James and another man followed them. I managed to wing one of them before they cornered Catherine in the west corridor." Reynolds assessed the situation quickly. "The panic room is magnetically sealed. They can't get in without the code. Unless they force Catherine to open it," Lily pointed out, her voice steady despite the danger. Reynolds met his daughter's gaze, seeing not fear, but fierce determination. "I need you to stay with the judge, Lily." "That's an order." "No." The single word carried the weight of her entire difficult life. "I know this house better than you do. All the hidden passages, the service corridors, I've mapped every inch while looking for escape routes." "This isn't up for debate," Reynolds insisted. "You're a child, and I survived 8 months on the streets when trained adults couldn't find me," Lily interrupted. "Ethan is my friend. I'm helping whether you like it or not." Reynolds recognized the stubborn set of her jaw, identical to his own, when faced with an impossible situation. "Fine, but you follow my lead and stay behind me at all times." As they crept through the mansion toward the west wing, Reynolds couldn't shake a terrible sense of déjà vu. Once again, his daughter was placing herself in danger to save Ethan Pierce. Once again, adults who should have protected a child had failed. And once again, it would likely be Lily, not the 38 officers now rushing to the estate, who made the difference between life and death. "You know," he whispered as they approached the corridor leading to the panic room. "Most kids your age are worried about homework and video games." Lily's response was pure steel wrapped in childish sincerity. Most kids had someone looking for them when they were lost. "I'm just returning the favor." Reynolds felt his throat tighten with emotion as they positioned themselves at the corner. Ahead, James Pierce and a bleeding Martin Delgado held Catherine at gunpoint outside the sealed panic room door, where Ethan was presumably safe inside. "One last chance, Catherine," James was saying, his voice eerily calm. "Open the door, or you die knowing your son will grow up an orphan." "Even if you kill me, you'll never get that money," Catherine replied defiantly. "The account transfers were reversed the moment you were arrested." "Then I'll settle for taking away everything you love, just as you did to me," James snarled, raising his weapon. Reynolds stepped into view, his service pistol aimed steadily. "Drop it, Pierce." "It's over." James spun around, using Catherine as a shield. "Officer Reynolds, how predictable. Tell me, is your little street rat hiding around the corner? Why not call her out so we can have a proper family reunion?" "This is between us," Reynolds replied evenly. "Let Catherine go." James laughed bitterly. "You know what's funny? If your brat hadn't interfered, none of this would have happened. Ethan would have disappeared. I would have inherited everything legally, and we all would have moved on with our lives. Except for the 3-year-old boy you planned to murder." Lily's voice came clearly as she stepped into view, ignoring her father's frantic signals to stay hidden. "Lily!" Reynolds hissed, but she continued forward, her green eyes locked on James Pierce. "You want to know something, Mr. Pierce?" she asked conversationally, edging closer. "There's a reason I survived on the streets when adults kept trying to catch me." James's grip on Catherine tightened as he trained his gun on Lily. "And what's that, you little vermin?" A slow, calculating smile spread across Lily's face, one Reynolds had never seen before, a reminder of the hard lessons life had taught her. "I learned to create distractions." In that moment, the sprinkler system activated, drenching everyone in cold water. The sudden deluge startled James and Delgado just long enough for Catherine to drive her elbow into her brother-in-law's stomach, while Reynolds tackled Delgado to the ground. James recovered quickly, aiming at Reynolds, but before he could fire a small blur of motion, Lily crashed into his legs, sending his shot wide. The gun skittered across the wet floor as James fell, his head connecting with the marble with a sickening crack. "Dad!" Lily called, scrambling away from the unconscious James. Reynolds secured Delgado with handcuffs before rushing to his daughter, checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt? What were you thinking?" "I was thinking about the emergency sprinkler override in the maintenance closet," Lily replied matter-of-factly, pointing to a small door nearby. "And how you taught me that surprise is sometimes better than strength." As security personnel and police flooded the corridor, Reynolds pulled his daughter into a tight embrace, his heart still racing with adrenaline and fear. "Promise me you'll never do something that dangerous again." Lily returned the hug with equal fervor. "I promise to try," she offered instead, both of them knowing it was the most honest answer she could give. The panic room door slid open to reveal Ethan, wide-eyed but unharmed. He rushed to his mother, then looked to Lily with unbridled admiration. "You saved us again!" Catherine, still trembling from the ordeal, managed a smile. "I'm beginning to think we should put Lily in charge of security around here. God help us all if that happens," Reynolds muttered, though his expression betrayed his immense pride. The entire police force would be obsolete within a week. Justice Hammond appeared, surveying the scene with judicial aplomb, despite her disheveled appearance. "I believe this conclusively voids Mr. Pierce's bail arrangement," she remarked dryly, "and provides several additional charges to his growing collection." As paramedics attended to the unconscious James and the wounded Delgado, Harold Winters arrived, completely unharmed and utterly confused by the commotion. "Did I miss something important?" he asked, taking in the sprinkler-soaked hallway and the handcuffed suspects. Lily broke away from her father to hug the old man fiercely. "The cottage! We thought you were inside when the smoke—" "Smoke?" Harold looked bewildered. "I was at the main gate, helping the delivery folks with my furniture. What cottage smoke?" "The diversion," Reynolds explained, holstering his weapon as James was stretchered away. "They set fire to your cottage to draw security away from the house." Well, Harold huffed indignantly, now I'll definitely have to accept Catherine's offer of residence. Can't have hoodlums burning down a perfectly good cottage before I've even slept in it. The absurdity of his comment broke the tension, laughter bubbling up despite the gravity of what had just transpired. As emergency personnel and police officers swarmed the estate, Lily found herself at the center of a protective circle. Her father, Harold, Catherine, Ethan, and Judge Hammond all watching her with a mixture of exasperation and awe. You know, Judge Hammond mused, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder, in 30 years on the bench, I've seen all manner of heroism, but I've never met anyone quite like you, Lily Reynolds. I'm not a hero, Lily insisted, suddenly self-conscious. I just did what anyone would do. That's where you're wrong, kid, Harold said softly. 38 trained officers walked away from a child asking for help. You were the only one who stopped. If that's not heroism, I don't know what is. As the chaos settled and statements were taken, Reynolds found a quiet moment with his daughter on the mansion's front steps. You broke your promise, you know, he said without heat, about following my lead and staying behind me. Lily leaned against him, exhaustion finally claiming her now that the danger had passed. I know, but sometimes adults don't make the right choices. Like 38 officers ignoring a crying child. Exactly. Lily yawned, her eyelids growing heavy. But you came back for Ethan in the end. That's what matters. Reynolds wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Because of you, Lily. You showed us all what real courage looks like. As Lily drifted toward sleep, her final mumbled words struck Reynolds to his core. Next time, maybe all the officers will listen the first time a kid asks for help. Reynolds looked out over the estate, where Harold was already directing clean-up efforts with authority that belied his age, where Catherine and Ethan huddled together, sharing whispered reassurances, where Judge Hammond was efficiently organizing the legal aftermath of James Pierce's final, desperate act. Yes, he promised his sleeping daughter. Next time they will. I'll make sure of it. Summer blazed across New York City, the heat wave breaking records and tempers in equal measure. 3 months had passed since James Pierce's final attempt to claim his brother's fortune. Now serving time in pre-trial detention with no possibility of bail, the would-be murderer had become just another cautionary tale in the city's tabloids. On the expansive grounds of the Pierce estate, a celebration was underway. Colourful balloons and streamers adorned Harold's fully restored cottage, where a hand-painted banner proclaimed, "Happy Birthday, Lily," in Ethan's wobbly handwriting. 9 years old, Reynolds marvelled, watching his daughter hold court among a mix of children, some from her new private school, others former street kids now residing at the Catherine Pierce Youth Centre. Hard to believe. Catherine, standing without assistance for the first time since her attack, smiled. She's something special. Do you think she liked her gift? The gift in question was a junior detective kit, complete with fingerprinting supplies, a digital recorder, and a magnifying glass. All professional grade rather than toys. Lily had immediately put them to use, dusting the cake for prints to determine if Ethan had sneaked an early taste. I think like is an understatement, Reynolds chuckled, though I'm slightly terrified about what cold cases she'll be solving by next week. Harold approached, carrying 3 lemonades. Your daughter just informed me that my cottage has 7 potential entry points that any decent burglar could exploit. Should I be concerned? Only if you're hiding something, Reynolds replied, accepting a glass. She's been inventorying security weaknesses across the estate. Caught 3 of my officers cutting corners last week. That girl's going to put us all out of jobs, Harold said with obvious pride. His role as security consultant had expanded to include mentoring youth center residents, his street wisdom proving invaluable for kids transitioning from homelessness. Across the lawn, Lily was demonstrating proper fingerprinting technique to a rapt audience of children. The transformation from the wary, defensive girl of 6 months ago to this confident young teacher was remarkable, though Reynolds still caught glimpses of her hard-earned wariness in quiet moments. Justice Hammond arrived fashionably late, carrying a wrapped package. "Court ran long," she explained, setting her gift among the others. "How's our birthday girl?" "See for yourself." Catherine nodded toward Lily, who had noticed the judge's arrival and was racing over, Ethan trailing faithfully behind. "You came!" Lily exclaimed, skidding to a stop before the distinguished jurist. "I wouldn't miss it," Hammond replied warmly, "though I bring news along with your gift. James Pierce's trial has been scheduled, September 12th. Lily's expression sobered. "Will I have to testify?" "Only if you want to," Reynolds interjected. "The evidence against him is substantial without your testimony." "I want to," Lily said firmly. "Someone needs to speak for Ethan and for all the kids nobody listens to." Before the conversation could continue, Ethan tugged urgently at Lily's sleeve. "Can we do cake now? Please." The adults exchanged knowing glances as the children raced back to the party. Some burdens were too heavy for small shoulders, no matter how strong those shoulders had proven to be. "She'll make a formidable witness," Hammond observed. "James Pierce's attorney won't know what hit him." Reynolds watched his daughter, torn between pride and concern. "That's what worries me. She's still a child despite everything. I don't want this trial defining her life." "Too late for that," Harold said quietly. The moment she stopped to help Ethan when 38 officers wouldn't, her path was set. Some people are just born to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. As if to punctuate his point, a commotion arose from the cake table. One of the former street kids, a boy named Marcus, with a history of impulsive behavior, had shoved another child who'd cut in line. Within seconds, Lily was there, diffusing the situation with the natural authority of someone twice her age. "Some mother-hen instinct she's got," Harold remarked. "Hard to believe that's the same kid who used to bite social workers." Reynolds couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, she still bites. Just ask her math tutor." The courthouse loomed imposingly against the September sky, its granite steps crawling with reporters and curious onlookers. The trial of James Pierce had become a media sensation, combining elements of true crime, high finance, and human interest that proved irresistible to network producers. Inside a private waiting room, Reynolds knelt before Lily, straightening the collar of her navy dress. "Remember, you don't have to do this. We can walk out right now." Lily met his gaze steadily. "I'm not scared of Uncle James." "I know you're not," Reynolds acknowledged, "but testifying means answering personal questions about your time on the streets, how you found Ethan, everything that happened that day." "Good," Lily replied with surprising vehemence. "People should know what it's like when nobody believes a kid just because they're small or poor or different." Reynolds recognized the stubborn set of her jaw, identical to his own, and knew further argument was pointless. Instead, he handed her a small object, her mother's locket, recovered from Claire's personal effects. "For courage," he said simply. "She'd be proud of you today." Lily fastened it around her neck, her fingers tracing the worn silver surface. "Do you really think so? Even after everything?" "Especially after everything." Reynolds squeezed her shoulder gently. "Ready." Before she could answer, the door opened to admit Catherine and Ethan, both dressed in formal attire. At 4, Ethan had only the vaguest understanding of the trial's purpose, but he recognized its importance from the adult's behavior. "Lily!" he exclaimed, rushing to hug his friend. "Mom says you're going to tell the judge about the bad man who hurt her." "That's right," Lily confirmed, returning his hug. "But you don't have to worry. He can't hurt anyone anymore." Catherine's expression conveyed her gratitude more eloquently than words. Like Reynolds, she had initially opposed Lily testifying, concerned about the psychological impact and media exposure. But the 9-year-old's determination had ultimately swayed them both. "The prosecutor says you'll be called first," Catherine informed them. "They want to establish the timeline before bringing in the financial evidence." Justice Hammond entered next, though she would not be presiding over this case. "Courtroom's filling up," she reported. "Standing room only, and the sketch artists are already setting up." Reynolds frowned. "No cameras, right? That was our condition." "No official cameras," Hammond clarified. "Though I'd be surprised if someone doesn't try to sneak footage. This is the trial of the year. Billionaire heir, corrupt cop ring, attempted child murder, and the homeless girl who cracked it all open." Lily absorbed this with surprising calm. "Will Uncle James be there, in the room?" "Yes," Reynolds answered honestly. "But he'll be wearing restraints, and there will be guards. He can't hurt you." "I'm not afraid of him," Lily repeated, though her hand tightened around her father's. "I just want to look him in the eye when I tell everyone what he did." A bailiff appeared at the door. "They're ready for the first witness." As they followed him through the labyrinthine courthouse corridors, Reynolds noticed Lily squaring her shoulders, lifting her chin, preparing for battle in her own way. So much rested on her small shoulders: Ethan's safety, Catherine's justice, even the reputation of the police department, which had launched internal investigations into the 38 officers who'd ignored Ethan's pleas. At the courtroom doors, Reynolds knelt once more. "Just tell the truth, exactly as you remember it." "That's all anyone can ask of you." Lily nodded solemnly. "I will." Then, with a flash of her old, street-hardened grin, she added, "Besides, I've faced scarier things than some fancy lawyer. Try sleeping under the 59th Street Bridge in January. That'll put hair on your chest." Reynolds choked back a startled laugh. For all her maturity, Lily was still a child, with a child's unpredictable humor and resilience. It was moments like these that reassured him most. The heavy doors swung open, revealing the packed courtroom beyond. At the defense table sat James Pierce, designer suit replaced by prison orange, his once confident posture now slumped in defeat. When he looked up and saw Lily, his expression darkened with hatred. Lily didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened her spine, clutched her mother's locket, and walked forward to tell her story, not just for herself or for Ethan, but for every child who'd ever been dismissed, ignored, or forgotten. "The prosecution calls Lily Reynolds to the stand," announced the district attorney, and Lily, survivor of streets and storms, stepped forward to speak her truth. "Would you please state your name and age for the record?" "Lily Reynolds. I'm 9 years old." The prosecutor, a seasoned woman named Diane Martinez, had deliberately softened her usual crisp demeanor when questioning the young witness. "Thank you, Lily. Can you tell the court what happened on the morning of April 14th this year?" Lily sat ramrod straight on the witness stand, her feet dangling above the floor, but her gaze unwavering. "I was in Central Park. I sleep there sometimes. I used to sleep there sometimes. I saw a little boy crying and talking to police officers." "How many officers were there?" 38, Lily answered without hesitation. "I counted them while they walked away laughing." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. James Pierce shifted uncomfortably at the defense table. And what was the boy saying to these officers? He said a man in black was following him and had hurt his mommy. He was crying really hard and pointing to the trees, but the officers thought he was making it up. "What did you do then, Lily?" "I went to help him. He told me his name was Ethan and showed me where he last saw his mom. We found her purse in the woods, but the man in black came back, so we had to hide." Martinez approached the evidence table, lifting a designer handbag sealed in plastic. "Is this the purse you found?" Lily nodded. "Yes." It had pictures inside of Ethan with his grandpa at a big house. "And while hiding, did you overhear anything?" "The man in black was talking on a phone. He said the kid needed to be missing when they read the will at noon." Lily's voice never wavered as she recounted the events. Finding Harold, discovering her connection to Officer Reynolds, the confrontation at Pierce Tower. The defense attorney, an expensive litigator named Gregory Phelps, watched with growing unease. His client had insisted the girl was making everything up, but her testimony contained details only someone present could know. "No further questions," Martinez concluded, returning to her table. Phelps approached the stand, his smile condescending. "Hello, Lily. I just have a few questions." Lily regarded him silently, unintimidated. "Now, you testified that you were homeless at the time of these events. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And you had been living on the streets for how long?" "About 8 months, since I was 8. Phelps nodded sympathetically. "That must have been very difficult. Did you ever have to steal food to survive?" "Objection!" Martinez rose. "Relevance goes to credibility, Your Honor," Phelps replied smoothly. The judge considered. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Counselor." Phelps repeated his question, clearly hoping to paint Lily as an unreliable witness with criminal tendencies. "Sometimes," Lily admitted frankly. "When the shelters were full or the church kitchens were closed, I took food from dumpsters behind restaurants mostly. That's not really stealing, though, since they threw it away." A few jurors smiled at her practical distinction. Undeterred, Phelps continued, "And during this time, did you ever tell lies to adults to get what you needed?" Lily considered this. "I gave false names to social workers so they wouldn't put me in the system. I told a hospital I fell downstairs when really a bigger kid beat me up for my spot under the bridge. I told a policeman I was waiting for my mum when really I was hiding from him." She paused, then looked directly at the jury. "But I never lied about important things like someone being hurt or in danger. That would be wrong." Phelps faltered momentarily before regrouping. "Lily, isn't it possible that in all the excitement you misheard what the man in the park said? Perhaps he wasn't talking about a will reading at all." "No," Lily replied with absolute certainty. "He said, 'The will gets read at noon and that brat needs to be missing when they do.' I remember exactly because it made me realize Ethan was in serious danger, not just lost." "And you expect the jury to believe that a man planning a serious crime would openly discuss it where anyone could overhear?" Lily fixed him with a look far older than her years. "Adults never look for children hiding in bushes, Mr. Phelps. They don't think we're paying attention, or they think we're too stupid to understand. That's why the man in black, Uncle James, didn't see us, and it's why 38 police officers didn't believe Ethan when he told them his mom was hurt." Her words hung in the courtroom, their truth impossible to dismiss. In the gallery, Reynolds felt a surge of fierce pride mingled with sadness that his daughter had learned such lessons so young. "No further questions," Phelps conceded, returning to his seat. As Lily stepped down from the witness stand, her eyes met James Pierce's for the first time. The hatred in his gaze would have made most adults flinch, but Lily simply stared back, unfazed. "You're not scary anymore," she said, just loudly enough for him to hear as she passed. "You're just a man who got beaten by a little girl." Winter descended on New York with particular ferocity that year, blanketing the city in snow and ice. Inside the newly completed Catherine Pierce Youth Center, however, warmth and activity prevailed. The converted warehouse complex now housed 32 formerly homeless children with facilities for education, healthcare, and family reunification services. Lily spent every Saturday at the center, her experiences making her uniquely qualified to connect with its residents. Today, she was helping a new arrival, a 7-year-old girl found sheltering in an abandoned subway station, adjust to having regular meals and a safe place to sleep. "The nightmares get better," Lily was explaining as Reynolds arrived to pick her up, "and nobody here makes you talk until you're ready." The younger girl nodded solemnly, clutching a new teddy bear like a lifeline. "Did the bad man go to jail forever?" "Pretty much," Lily confirmed. James Pierce had been sentenced to 25 years without parole for attempted murder, conspiracy, and financial crimes. And the police officers who didn't listen got in big trouble too. This was true. All 38 officers had faced disciplinary action, with 12 dismissed from the force entirely. The incident had sparked departmental reforms in how officers responded to children's reports, now unofficially known as the Lily Protocol. "Ready to go, kiddo?" Reynolds called from the doorway. "Harold's making his famous chili for dinner." Lily gave the younger girl a quick hug before gathering her things. On their way out, they passed Catherine's office, where she was meeting with state officials about expanding the program. 38 officers ignored Ethan that day, Catherine was saying, her voice carrying into the hallway. Imagine how many children we never hear about at all. And in the 6 months since James Pierce's conviction, the story had become something of an urban legend among New York's homeless population. Kids in trouble now specifically asked for the cop whose daughter was homeless or the officer who believes children, both referring to Reynolds, whose reputation had undergone a dramatic transformation. "Dad," Lily began as they drove through the snowy streets, "I've been thinking about something." "Should I be worried?" Reynolds asked lightly. Lily's thinking often led to ambitious projects or uncomfortable questions. "It's about Mom." She twisted her locket absently. "You said she died because of addiction, right?" "Yes," Reynolds confirmed, glancing at her with concern. "The medical examiner found heroin in her system. But before that, before she got sick, she was a good mom, wasn't she?" Reynolds chose his words carefully. "She loved you very much, Lily. She was kind, creative, funny. The addiction changed her, but that doesn't erase who she was before." "That's what I thought." Lily nodded decisively. "I want to start a program at the center for kids whose parents have addiction, so they don't end up on the streets like I did." Reynolds felt the familiar mixture of pride and sadness that often accompanied his daughter's mature insights. "That's a wonderful idea. Have you talked to Catherine about it?" "Not yet. I wanted to ask you first, since it's about Mom." "I think she'd be honored," Reynolds assured her, "and I'll help however I can." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, windshield wipers keeping time against the falling snow. Eventually, Lily spoke again. "There's something else. I found a picture at Harold's cottage of you and 37 other officers receiving commendations. It's from 9 years ago." Reynolds frowned, confused by the apparent non sequitur. "That would have been the Roosevelt Park drug bust." "Why?" "Because those are the same officers who ignored Ethan," Lily explained, "all except you. I recognized their faces from the trial photos." Reynolds nearly swerved off the road in shock. "Lily, are you sure about this?" "Positive. I never forget her face." It was true. Her memory for people was extraordinary, a survival skill honed during her time on the streets. "They all worked with you back then, when you were trying to get Mom into rehab." The implications hit Reynolds like a physical blow. The officers who'd ignored Ethan hadn't been random. They were specifically officers who knew Reynolds and Claire's history. Officers who might have harbored resentment toward the daughter of a woman they considered a criminal. "This changes everything," he muttered, mind-racing. "If they recognized you, if they deliberately ignored Ethan because of who you are, then it wasn't just laziness or disbelief," Lily finished. "It was personal." Reynolds pulled the car over, needing a moment to process this revelation. "Lily, this is very serious. If what you're suggesting is true, it means corruption much deeper than we realized." "I know." Her expression was grave beyond her years. "That's why I waited to tell you until after Christmas. I didn't want to ruin the holidays." Despite the gravity of the situation, Reynolds had to suppress a laugh. Only his daughter would delay revealing a police conspiracy out of consideration for the holiday spirit. "We'll need to take this to internal affairs," he said. "Are you prepared for what that might mean? More investigations, possibly another trial?" Lily's response was simple and resolute. 38 officers almost let Ethan die because they had a grudge against you and Mom. What if they've done it to other kids too? In that moment, Reynolds understood that his daughter's sense of justice would always outweigh her desire for a quiet life, a trait she'd inherited from both her parents, for better or worse. "All right," he agreed. "But first, we're having Harold's chili. Some battles are better fought on a full stomach." "Absolutely not." Captain Harris slammed his fist on his desk, face reddening beneath his salt and pepper crew cut. "I will not authorize another internal investigation based on a 9-year-old's conspiracy theory." Reynolds maintained his composure despite his rising frustration. "So this isn't just Lily's theory. I found documentation that all 38 officers who ignored Ethan Pierce's plea for help were directly involved in Claire Reynolds's drug cases. That can't be coincidence. Coincidence or not, the department has already taken disciplinary action. The case is closed." Harris shuffled papers dismissively. "Besides, your daughter's testimony is hardly unbiased. She has a personal stake in painting these officers as villains." "My daughter," Reynolds said evenly, "risked her life to save a child when 38 trained professionals failed to do so. I'd say that earns her the benefit of the doubt." Harris sighed heavily. "Look, Grant, no one's denying the girl's bravery. She's been through hell and back, and she's got more guts than half the department. But this witch hunt needs to end. The Pierce case brought enough bad publicity." Reynolds recognized the political calculus behind Harris's resistance. The department was still reeling from the scandal of officers on James Pierce's payroll. Another layer of corruption would be devastating. "What if it's not just the Pierce case?" Reynolds pressed. "What if other children have been ignored by these same officers? What if there's a pattern?" Harris's expression darkened. "You're treading dangerous ground, Reynolds. Let it go before you destroy your career." "Like you destroyed Claire's case files," Reynolds countered, playing his final card. "I checked the archives, Captain. Her files from 9 years ago have been purged." The color drained from Harris's face. "Get out of my office." "I have copies," Reynolds lied smoothly. "Made them before approaching you, just in case." It was a gamble. He had no copies, only Lily's recollection and his own suspicions. But Harris's reaction confirmed his worst fears. "What do you want?" the captain asked flatly. "Authorization to review all juvenile witness statements taken by those 38 officers over the past 10 years. No official investigation yet, just a review." Harris considered this, clearly calculating his options. "Fine. You have 2 weeks, and you do it quietly. If you find nothing, this ends permanently. Understood?" "Understood." Reynolds stood to leave, then paused. "One more thing, sir. Were you involved?" The captain met his gaze steadily. "Do you think I'd still be sitting here if I was? Now get out before I change my mind." 2 days later, Reynolds sat surrounded by files in a basement records room, his eyes burning from hours of review. So far, he'd found 7 cases where children reported crimes that were summarily dismissed by officers from the Pierce incident. 3 involved missing persons, 2 were assault allegations, and 2 concerned suspected drug activity. "You look like you need this more than I do," Harold remarked, appearing with 2 coffee cups. The old man had become Reynolds' unofficial assistant in this investigation, his street connections providing information official channels couldn't. 7 cases, Harold. Reynolds accepted the coffee gratefully. 7 kids who might have suffered because these officers had a grudge against Claire, and by extension, any child associated with her. 8, actually. Harold placed a weathered manila envelope on the desk. "My contacts at the shelter on 43rd remembered a boy, about 12, who came in 3 years ago claiming he'd witnessed a murder, said he told police, but they laughed him off. Let me guess, one of our 38? 3 of them, Harold confirmed. Kid gave up trying to report it after that. Disappeared from the shelter system about a month later. Reynolds added the envelope to his growing pile of evidence. This is worse than I imagined. It's not just about Lily or Ethan anymore. Was it ever? Harold sank into a chair, his expression grave. The Pierce case just happened to have a billionaire's grandson and a determined homeless girl who wouldn't give up. Most of these kids don't have anyone fighting for them. Reynolds ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. How do I tell Lily about this? She already blames herself for not coming forward sooner. Tell her the truth, Harold advised. That girl survived worse than bad news. Later that evening, as snow fell outside their modest apartment, Reynolds explained what they'd discovered. Lily absorbed the information with the solemn attention that still sometimes unnerved him. So much awareness behind such young eyes. So it's not just about Mom, she concluded. They're hurting kids because they can, because nobody stops them. It seems that way, Reynolds admitted, but we're going to stop them now. Lily nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. Good. When do we start? Spring arrived with a vengeance, as if determined to erase winter's harshness through sheer abundance of bloom and birdsong. On the Pierce estate, flowers carpeted the expansive lawns while gardeners prepared for the annual charity gala, an event that had taken on special significance this year. The Catherine Pierce Foundation for Child Advocacy, Catherine announced, unveiling a banner bearing the organization's new logo, a stylized silhouette of 2 children hand in hand, dedicated to ensuring no child's voice goes unheard. Applause rippled through the assembled staff and supporters. The foundation would serve as an umbrella organization for the Youth Center and several new initiatives, including the Addiction Family Support Program Lily had proposed. In the 6 months since Reynolds had uncovered the pattern of officers dismissing children's reports, the case had expanded exponentially. 23 incidents had now been documented, resulting in 14 officers facing criminal charges and another 16 undergoing disciplinary review. Not bad for a hobby project, Harold remarked to Reynolds as they watched Catherine's presentation. Though I notice Captain Harris managed to retire with full benefits before the indictments came down. Some battles you win, some you manage, Reynolds replied philosophically. At least the new policies are being implemented department-wide. The Lily Protocol had been officially adopted, requiring officers to document and investigate all reports made by children, with mandatory review by supervisors. Additionally, a new youth liaison unit had been created, staffed by officers with specialized training in child psychology. "Dad!" Lily's voice carried across the lawn as she raced toward them, Ethan close behind. At 10 years old, she had grown nearly 2 inches since her birthday, though she remained small for her age, a lasting effect of months of inadequate nutrition on the streets. "What's up, kiddo?" "We finished the presentation for tomorrow," she announced proudly. "Ethan's going to introduce me, and then I'll tell everyone about the new youth center programs." The Pierce Foundation's inaugural fundraising gala would feature Lily and Ethan as keynote speakers, a decision that had initially concerned Reynolds, but which Catherine had persuasively argued would be powerful testimony to their mission. "Just promise me you won't go off script again," Reynolds pleaded, recalling her impromptu additions to a recent school presentation that had left her teacher speechless. "There will be a lot of important donors there." Lily's expression was pure innocence. "Would I do that?" "Yes," Ethan and Reynolds answered simultaneously. She grinned, unrepentant. "Fine, I'll stick to the script. Mostly." As the children raced off to continue their preparations, Justice Hammond approached, elegant as ever, in a spring suit that somehow complemented her judicial gravitas. "Your daughter continues to impress," she observed. Not many children her age could speak about trauma and recovery with such eloquence. "Sometimes I worry she's still carrying too much," Reynolds admitted. "The nightmares haven't stopped completely, and she still hoards food in her room despite knowing she doesn't need to anymore." Hammond nodded, understanding. "Healing isn't linear, Grant. Trust me, I've seen enough victims in my courtroom to know that recovery has its own timeline. I just want her to have a normal childhood, what's left of it anyway." "Normal is overrated," Harold interjected. "That girl was never going to be ordinary, even without everything that happened. Some people are just born to change the world." Later that evening, as Reynolds helped Lily prepare for bed, he noticed her arranging small food items in her nightstand drawer, a ritual that persisted despite months of food security. "You know," he said gently, "we're not going to run out of food. There will always be breakfast in the morning." Lily nodded. "I know. It's not about being hungry anymore." "What is it about, then?" She considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Control, I think. When I was on the streets, I never knew where my next meal would come from. Having food hidden makes me feel safe." Reynolds sat on the edge of her bed, once again struck by his daughter's self-awareness. "That makes sense. I'm sorry you ever had to worry about that." "It wasn't your fault," Lily said simply. "Mom took me away. You didn't know where I was. I should have found you sooner." "You were looking in the wrong places," she pointed out practically. "Besides, if you had found me earlier, I wouldn't have been there when Ethan needed help." "Then where would we be?" The logic was both heartbreaking and oddly comforting. Reynolds often marveled at how his daughter could find meaning in her suffering, transforming trauma into purpose with a resilience that humbled him. "Get some sleep," he said, tucking her in. "Big day tomorrow." "Dad?" Lily's voice stopped him at the doorway. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me for helping all those kids?" Reynolds felt his throat tighten. "Absolutely. She'd be amazed by the incredible person you've become." As he closed her door, Reynolds couldn't help reflecting on how far they'd come since that fateful day in Central Park. His daughter had taught him more about courage and justice in 1 year than he'd learned in 15 years of police work. Whatever challenges tomorrow's gala might bring, he had absolute faith in Lily's ability to face them. What neither of them knew was that the gala would test that faith in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. The Pierce mansion glittered with lights as New York's elite arrived for the Foundation Gala. Women in designer gowns and men in bespoke tuxedos strolled through gardens illuminated by thousands of fairy lights, champagne flowing freely as donations mounted into the millions. In a quiet room away from the festivities, Lily stood before a mirror, adjusting the blue dress Catherine had selected for her presentation. Unlike the navy outfit from the trial, this one had been chosen by Lily herself. Practical enough to move in, but elegant enough for the occasion. "You look beautiful," Reynolds said from the doorway, resplendent in his dress uniform. As the Foundation's new security director, his presence was both professional and personal tonight. Lily made a face. "I look like a kid playing dress-up." "That's literally what you are," he pointed out with a smile. "A kid dressed up for a party." "I guess." She tugged at her collar. "I just don't want to mess this up. Mrs. Pierce says this fundraiser could help hundreds of kids." "You won't mess up," Reynolds assured her. "Just speak from the heart, like you always do." A soft knock announced Catherine's arrival. "10 minutes until you're on, sweetheart. Ethan's already waiting backstage." "I'm ready," Lily declared, squaring her shoulders in a gesture Reynolds had come to recognize as her preparation for battle, whether facing a courtroom, a classroom, or apparently a ballroom of wealthy donors. They made their way through service corridors to avoid the main crowd, arriving at a side entrance to the mansion's grand ballroom. Through the door, they could hear the elegant murmur of conversation, punctuated by occasional laughter. "Quite a crowd," Harold remarked, appearing beside them in a surprisingly well-tailored suit. Must be 400 people out there. 423, Catherine confirmed. Every major foundation and philanthropic organization in the city is represented. Lily peered through the small window in the door. They all look so fancy. And they're all about to be impressed by the bravest girl in New York, Reynolds assured her. Just remember, if you get nervous, find my face in the crowd. Catherine's assistant appeared, signaling it was time. With a final deep breath, Lily followed her to the wings of the small stage that had been erected at the ballroom's far end. Reynolds, Catherine and Harold slipped into the ballroom through a side door, taking their reserved seats at the front table. On stage, Catherine's chief of staff was concluding his introduction about the Foundation's mission. "And now," he announced, "please welcome Ethan Pierce and Lily Reynolds, whose extraordinary story inspired the creation of the Catherine Pierce Foundation." Applause filled the room as Ethan walked confidently to the podium, his 4-year-old charm immediately winning over the crowd. Lily followed a step behind, her expression composed despite the hundreds of eyes upon her. "Hi, everyone," Ethan began with practiced ease. "My name is Ethan Pierce, and this is my best friend, Lily. 1 year ago, a bad man hurt my mom and tried to hurt me too. 38 police officers didn't believe me when I asked for help." A hush fell over the ballroom as the child continued his simple but powerful narrative. "But Lily believed me. She was homeless and had nobody to help her, but she still helped me. That's why my mom started this foundation, so every kid has someone who listens when they're in trouble." Ethan turned to Lily with a bright smile. "And now Lily's going to tell you about all the other kids who need your help." As Lily stepped forward, Reynolds felt a surge of pride so intense it was almost painful. In her blue dress, with her mother's locket gleaming at her throat, she looked both vulnerable and indomitable, a child who had endured more in 10 years than most adults faced in a lifetime. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Lily Reynolds. For 8 months I lived on the streets of New York after my mother disappeared. During that time, I learned 3 important things." She held up one finger. "First, invisible doesn't mean gone. Just because you don't see the homeless children in this city doesn't mean they're not there, trying to survive each day." A second finger joined the first. "Second, the systems meant to protect children often fail exactly when they're needed most. That failure isn't always because people don't care. Sometimes it's because they're following rules instead of listening to the children right in front of them." Finally, a third finger. "And third, sometimes all it takes to save a life is one person who stops and listens." Reynolds watched as his daughter commanded the attention of some of New York's most powerful individuals. Gone was any trace of nervousness, replaced by the quiet authority she had developed through adversity. "The Catherine Pierce Foundation isn't just about providing shelter or food," Lily continued. "It's about creating a world where children's voices matter, where 38 adults can't walk away from a crying child because they're too busy or too important or too prejudiced to listen." The ballroom remained utterly silent, hundreds of wealthy benefactors transfixed by a 10-year-old's unvarnished truth. "Tonight," she concluded, "you have the power to ensure that what happened to Ethan and to me never happens to another child in this city. Please don't walk away like those 38 officers did. Please stop and listen." The silence held for one breathless moment before the room erupted in thunderous applause, the crowd rising to their feet in a spontaneous standing ovation. Lily blinked, momentarily startled by the reaction, before Ethan took her hand and led her in a small bow. As the children exited the stage, Reynolds rose to meet them, gathering Lily in a fierce embrace. "You were amazing," he whispered. "Absolutely amazing." "Did I do okay?" she asked, suddenly just a child again, seeking reassurance. "You did better than okay," Catherine assured her, approaching with Harold. You were authentic, exactly what these people needed to hear. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and introductions. Donors lined up to meet the children, checkbooks open and hearts moved by their story. By midnight, the foundation had raised over $12 million, far exceeding Catherine's most optimistic projections. As the last guest departed and the staff began cleaning up, Lily sat on the mansion's front steps beside her father, finally free of her formal shoes. "You know what's funny?" she said, gazing up at the star-filled sky. "A year ago, I was sleeping under a bridge, convinced no one would ever listen to a kid like me. Now hundreds of people just stood up and clapped because I told them to listen to kids like me." Reynolds put his arm around her shoulders. "That's because you're pretty hard to ignore once you start talking, kiddo." "You must run in the family," she replied with a grin. "Ethan says you gave a speech at the police academy last week that made 3 cadets cry." "2 cadets," Reynolds corrected. "The third one was allergic to the flowers in the auditorium." Their laughter mingled in the quiet night, a father and daughter finding joy, despite, or perhaps because of, the difficult journey that had brought them together. Neither suspected that their most difficult challenge was yet to come. Summer heat smothered the city like a wet blanket, air conditioners straining against record temperatures as New Yorkers sought relief wherever they could find it. In the Pierce Foundation's youth center, a different kind of tension simmered beneath the surface. "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this," Reynolds said, trying to keep frustration from his voice. "It's a fantastic opportunity." Lily crossed her arms, her expression mutinous. "I'm not going." The subject of their disagreement, a prestigious boarding school in New Hampshire that had offered Lily a full scholarship, had become an increasingly contentious topic over the past week. Catherine had pulled strings to secure the placement, convinced it would provide opportunities Lily couldn't get elsewhere. "It's one of the best schools in the country," Reynolds persisted. "The education you'd receive there—" "I don't care," Lily interrupted. "I'm not leaving New York. I'm not leaving the youth center. And I'm not leaving Ethan." Reynolds pinched the bridge of his nose, seeking patience. At 10, Lily's stubborn streak had only intensified with security and stability. The traumatized girl, who'd once been willing to accept any safe harbor, now fought fiercely for her chosen path. "This isn't about Ethan, is it?" he asked softly. "It's about me. You're afraid I won't be here when you come back." Lily's silence confirmed his suspicion. Despite nearly 18 months of rebuilding trust, the fear of abandonment still lurked beneath her confident exterior. "I'm not going anywhere, Lily. I promise." "Mom promised too," she replied, the words landing like a physical blow. "She promised she'd come back to the shelter that night. She promised we'd always be together." Before Reynolds could respond, Harold appeared at the office doorway, his weathered face unusually grave. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you both need to see." He handed Reynolds a newspaper, folded to display a headline, "Pierce Killer Cop Released on Technicality." Below it, a smaller subheading read, "Officer Donovan Walks Free After Evidence Ruling." "How is this possible?" Reynolds demanded, scanning the article with growing horror. "He confessed to being on James Pierce's payroll. He tried to kill Catherine in her hospital bed." "Judge ruled the confession inadmissible," Harold explained. "Said he wasn't properly Mirandized during the hospital confrontation." Lily snatched the paper, her eyes widening as she read. "He's really free, after everything he did." "Legally, yes," Harold confirmed. "Though I'd guess his career in law enforcement is over." Reynolds was already reaching for his phone. "I need to warn Catherine. If Donovan's out, Ethan could be in danger." "Already done," Harold assured him. "She's increasing security at the mansion, but that's not the only concern." He pointed to a paragraph near the end of the article that quoted Donovan leaving the courthouse. "The truth about what really happened that day will come out. Some people might be surprised to learn who the real victims were." He's threatening to go public with some story that paints him as the victim. Reynolds shook his head in disbelief. Who would believe that? People believe what they want to believe, Harold replied grimly. Especially when it comes wrapped in a counter-narrative that challenges the established story. Donovan knows exactly what he's doing, creating doubt where there was certainty. Lily had gone quiet, a familiar calculation visible behind her eyes. He's going to say I made everything up, isn't he? That I manipulated Ethan and framed Uncle James. Reynolds and Harold exchanged concerned glances, impressed and disturbed by her insight. It's what I would do in his position, Lily continued matter-of-factly. Attack the weakest link in the chain, the homeless girl with a history of lying to authorities. You're not the weakest link, Reynolds objected. Your testimony was corroborated by evidence, by Catherine's statement, by everything we found subsequently. Doesn't matter, Lily shrugged with the weary pragmatism of someone who'd seen too much of the world's injustice. People already think street kids are liars and thieves. It won't take much to make them question everything else. Her calm analysis frightened Reynolds more than tears would have. This is exactly why the boarding school makes sense, Lily. You'd be away from all this, somewhere safe while the legal system sorts it out. No, she replied with absolute finality. I'm not running away. I didn't run from Uncle James, and I won't run from Officer Donovan either. If he wants to tell lies about me, I'll stand right here and tell the truth about him. Harold chuckled, despite the situation's gravity. Remind me never to get on your bad side, kid. Reynolds felt torn between pride in his daughter's courage and terror at the thought of her facing a vindictive ex-cop with nothing to lose. Before he could argue further, his phone rang. Catherine, her voice tight with controlled panic. You need to come to the mansion right away, she said without preamble. Ethan received a package. Inside was a black ski mask and a note that said, The man in black is coming back. Reynolds felt the blood drain from his face. We're on our way. Don't touch anything else, and keep Ethan in sight at all times. As he hung up, Lily was already grabbing her backpack. What happened? Someone threatened Ethan, Reynolds explained, knowing better than to shield her from information that affected their safety. We need to go to the mansion now. Donovan? Harold asked. Or someone working with him. Reynolds checked his service weapon before holstering it. Either way, this just became a lot more than a PR problem. As they hurried to the car, Lily's expression had transformed from stubborn child to focused survivor. The boarding school can wait, she said simply. Ethan needs me here. Reynolds couldn't argue with that. Whatever disagreements they had about her education, they were united in their determination to protect the little boy who had brought them together, and to face whatever threats Donovan might pose. What none of them realized was that the former officer had been planning his revenge since the moment of his arrest, and the ski mask was just the opening move in a carefully orchestrated game. Darkness had fallen by the time they finished processing the Pierce mansion for evidence. The ski mask had yielded no fingerprints or trace DNA, and the threatening note had been printed on a common laser printer using standard font, untraceable. Professional, Reynolds concluded, conferring with the forensic technicians. Not what I'd expect from Donovan acting alone. Catherine sat nearby, Ethan asleep with his head in her lap, exhausted from hours of questioning by gentle but thorough investigators. Could James be orchestrating this from prison? Possible, Reynolds acknowledged, though his communications are heavily monitored. Lily had remained unusually quiet throughout the investigation, observing everything with the intense focus Reynolds had come to recognize as her processing mode. Now she approached, a thoughtful expression on her face. "What is it?" he asked, recognizing she'd worked something out. "The package came by courier, right?" When Catherine nodded, Lily continued, and the courier company verified it was dropped off at their office, not picked up from a sender. That's right, Reynolds confirmed. Paid for in cash by someone wearing a hat and sunglasses. Security cameras were conveniently malfunctioning. So, whoever sent it knew about security protocols, Lily reasoned. They knew how to avoid leaving evidence. Like a cop would, Reynolds completed her thought, or someone with access to police methods. Lily nodded. But there's something else. The note said, "The man in black is coming back," not just coming back. Catherine frowned. What's the significance? Those were my exact words to the officers that day. Ethan's small voice startled them all. He had awakened and was listening intently. I said the man in black was coming back, not just coming back. A chill ran through the room as the implication became clear. Only someone who was there that morning would know those exact words, Reynolds said slowly. The trial transcripts don't include that specific phrasing. Donovan wasn't there, Lily pointed out. He was one of the officers, but he wasn't the first one Ethan spoke to. No, Reynolds agreed, memory sharpening. That was Officer Reyes, Lily supplied. I remember because he had a name tag with a bent corner. He was the one who laughed first. Reynolds was already reaching for his phone. Reyes wasn't among the officers indicted. He received administrative discipline but kept his job. After a brief conversation with headquarters, he turned back to the group, his expression grim. Reyes called in sick today. His supervisor says he's been acting strangely since Donovan's release was announced. So now we have 2 rogue cops potentially targeting children, Catherine summarized, her arm tightening protectively around Ethan. What's our next move? We secure this location, Reynolds decided. Triple the security detail. No one enters without biometric confirmation. Then we find Reyes before he makes his next move. Ethan clutched his mother's sleeve. Are they going to hurt Lily too? Because she helped me. The innocent question hung in the air, voicing the fear no adult had been willing to articulate. Reynolds looked at his daughter, remembering how small and vulnerable she had seemed that first day in Central Park, and how fiercely capable she had proven herself since. No one is going to hurt either of you, he promised, though he knew better than to make guarantees in such situations. We're going to stay together and stay safe. Actually, Lily said, an odd calm in her voice, I think I should go to the boarding school after all. Reynolds stared at her, blindsided by this complete reversal. What? Now? Not for real, she clarified, a familiar calculation visible behind her eyes. But if everyone thinks I've left the city, I won't be a target anymore. And if I'm not a target, I can help find Officer Reyes without him knowing. Absolutely not, Reynolds declared. I'm not using my 10-year-old daughter as bait or letting her play detective against armed suspects. I'm not suggesting that, Lily insisted. Just spread the word that I've been sent away for safety. Meanwhile, I stay with Harold or Justice Hammond, someone not obvious. I can review case files, help identify patterns. I know how these officers think. Reynolds wanted to reject the idea outright, but years of police work had taught him to evaluate strategies based on merit rather than emotional reaction, and frustratingly, Lily's plan had merit. Removing her as a perceived threat could give them time to locate Reyes and Donovan without endangering her or Ethan. It's not the worst idea, Harold admitted reluctantly. My cottage has state-of-the-art security now, thanks to Catherine's renovation. No one would think to look for her there. And I do have experience analyzing evidence, Lily added. I found connections no one else saw in the original 38 officers' case. Catherine watched this exchange with growing amazement. She's 10 years old, she reminded them. This isn't a Nancy Drew mystery. It's a potentially deadly threat from trained police officers. I know exactly how dangerous they are, Lily replied quietly. I lived on the streets because of officers like them. ones who decided a little girl didn't deserve protection because of who her mother was. The room fell silent, the adult struck by the weight of experience behind her words. Reynolds looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just a child, but a survivor whose unique perspective might be exactly what they needed. "We'll consider it," he said finally, "but only if we establish clear boundaries and safety protocols, and at the first sign of escalation you're out, no arguments." Lily nodded solemnly. Agreed. As they continued planning security measures, Reynolds couldn't shake a growing certainty that they were missing something crucial, that the threat was closer and more immediate than they realized. He was right. Less than a mile away, in a nondescript apartment, Officer Reyes was completing preparations for an operation 18 months in the making. On his wall, photographs of Lily, Ethan, and the Pierce estate were arranged in meticulous order, alongside blueprints and security protocols only someone with inside access could have obtained. "Donovan's release was just phase 1, he muttered into a phone. "Tomorrow we move to phase 2. The girl thinks she's so smart. Let's see how she handles a real threat." The voice on the other end replied simply, "Remember, we need both children alive for the exchange. After that, you can do whatever you want with the little street rat." Reyes smiled coldly. "Don't worry, I've waited a long time for this. I won't rush the payback." What neither man knew was that their conversation was being recorded, not by law enforcement, but by a 10-year-old girl who had learned long ago that survival sometimes meant breaking the rules. 6 months later, snow-dusted Central Park in a pristine white blanket, transforming the landscape where it had all begun nearly 2 years earlier. Lily stood at the exact spot where she'd first met Ethan, her breath forming small clouds in the December air. "It looks different in winter," Ethan observed, now a confident 5-year-old holding tightly to Catherine's hand. "Less scary." "Everything looks different with time," Lily agreed, her gaze sweeping the familiar terrain. "Especially the scary parts." Reynolds watched from a few paces away, still vigilant, despite the months that had passed since the threat had been neutralized. The case had concluded dramatically. Officer Reyes and 3 co-conspirators arrested in a sting operation that made national headlines, their plot to kidnap both children and extort the Pierce fortune exposed just hours before they planned to execute it. What the headlines hadn't mentioned was Lily's pivotal role in gathering evidence, how her illegal recording of Reyes's phone call had given them the break they needed, or how her insights into the conspirators' psychology had helped predict their moves. The official story credited confidential informants and detailed police work, protecting Lily from both legal complications and public exposure. "Ready?" Catherine asked, gesturing toward the waiting car. "We don't want to be late for Harold's citizenship ceremony." The old newspaper vendor had finally agreed to formalize his status after decades of living in legal limbo. His role in protecting the children had earned him powerful advocates, including Justice Hammond, who had personally overseen the expedited process. "Almost ready," Lily replied. "Just need 1 more minute." Understanding her need for closure, the others moved toward the car, giving her a moment alone with her thoughts. Lily knelt in the snow, pressing her palm against the cold ground where she'd once hidden from authorities and slept under stars too faint to see through city lights. "I made it," she whispered to no one and everyone, to the girl she had been, to the mother she had lost, to the universe that had somehow brought her full circle to this place of beginnings and endings. Rising, she joined her family at the car, sliding into the warm interior beside Ethan, who immediately showed her his latest drawing, a stick-figure representation of their adventure, complete with a tiny Lily standing triumphantly atop a pile of defeated bad guys. "You always make me look taller in your pictures," she teased, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Because you are tall," he insisted with 5-year-old logic, "on the inside where it matters." Reynolds caught his daughter's eye in the rearview mirror, sharing a silent moment of understanding. They had both changed profoundly since that April morning, when 38 officers walked away from a crying child. The department had changed too, new protocols, new training, new accountability measures, all stemming from what the media now called the 38 case. And as they drove toward the federal building where Harold would take his oath, Reynolds reflected on everything they had survived. The conspiracy had been larger than anyone suspected, reaching into the highest levels of the department and connecting to James Pierce through a network of corrupt officers who had been protecting his illegal operations for years. When the dust settled, 7 high-ranking officers had been indicted alongside Reyes and Donovan. Captain Harris had avoided prosecution through a plea deal, his testimony helping dismantle the entire network. The Lilly Protocol had been adopted by police departments in 12 cities, with federal legislation pending to make it nationwide. And Lilly herself? She had finally agreed to attend the New Hampshire boarding school, but only for their advanced academic program, 3 days a week. The remaining time she split between home with Reynolds and her continuing work at the youth center, where her experiences made her uniquely qualified to connect with traumatized children. "Penny, for your thoughts," Catherine said quietly, interrupting Reynolds' reflection. "Just thinking about how much has changed," he replied. 2 years ago, I was still searching for my daughter. You were fighting with your father-in-law over his business practices, and Ethan was just learning to form complete sentences. And now?" she prompted. Reynolds glanced back at the children, Lily helping Ethan sound out words in a picture book, her patience infinite despite her own academic acceleration. "Now we're all exactly where we're supposed to be." At the federal building, Harold waited nervously in his best suit, a small American flag pin adorning his lapel. When he spotted them, his weathered face broke into a smile that erased decades of hardship. "There they are," he announced to no one in particular. "My family." The words struck Reynolds with unexpected force. Somehow, against all odds, they had indeed become a family, not through blood alone, but through shared purpose and mutual protection. Catherine and Ethan, Harold, even Justice Hammond, who arrived moments later, all bound together by a single moment when a homeless girl stopped to help a crying boy. As they entered the ceremony hall, Reynolds felt Lily slip her hand into his, a gesture that had once been rare, but now came naturally. "Dad," she whispered, "do you remember what you said when you first found me, about how some people are born to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them?" Reynolds nodded, surprised she'd remembered those words from such a chaotic time. "I think that's us," she continued. "Not just you as a police officer, but all of us. That's why we found each other." Reynolds squeezed her hand, too moved to speak immediately. His daughter, once so hardened by life's cruelties, had somehow retained the capacity to find meaning and purpose in her pain. "You might be right," he managed finally. "Though I think you were born that way. The rest of us just followed your lead." Lily considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. Maybe we just needed someone small enough to remind us how big our responsibility really is. As Harold raised his hand to take the oath of citizenship, Reynolds reflected on his daughter's wisdom. In a world where 38 trained officers could walk away from a child in need, perhaps the most revolutionary act was simply stopping to listen, and the most profound leadership came from those small enough to see what the powerful overlooked. "By the way," Lily whispered as the ceremony began, "I've been thinking about becoming a judge someday. Justice Hammond says I have the right temperament." Reynolds suppressed a laugh, imagining his stubborn, justice-obsessed daughter on the bench. "God help the lawyers who appear in your courtroom." Her smile was serene and slightly mischievous. "They'll be fine as long as they never ever ignore a child asking for help."